My name is Kent Lewis Brown. I was born on the Ides of March in Westfield in 1916. My father, Lewis Brown, was an accomplished dentist here in Westfield, and my mother was Emma Kent Brown. I was the second born of four children. Growing up, I think I may have been a challenge to my parents. It seems like I was always in hot water for pulling what I thought were pretty funny pranks. My folks didn't always agree. One time I killed a big black snake in our yard on Kent and Pleasant Streets. I tied it to a string, hooked it to my belt, and ran through the house yelling that there was a snake after me. I thought my mother was going to have a stroke, and I realized I may have gone a little far. I did well in school for the most part. I was president of my junior and senior class. I always had various jobs around Westfield to make money, and I was involved in many things during my school years. I was a Boy Scout and earned my Eagle Scout badge. I formed an orchestra with many of my musical friends. There were usually 9 of us in the band, and we played at many functions around Westfield. I was very active in the youth group at the Presbyterian Church. Football was my favorite sport. One memorable occasion, at least for those watching the game, was when one of the linemen from Fredonia charged into me and knocked me out. My mother ran from the stands with her umbrella and threatened the poor boy who hit me. It must have been very embarrassing for him. I was very close to my grandpa, Vernon Kent. I think I was his favorite, perhaps because I carried the family name. I would have done anything for him. At one point in elementary school, I became ill with a tuberculosis lesion in my lung. My grandfather convinced my parents that we should go with him to Florida. I remember he smoked his big old cigars one after another, and I thought I would be asphyxiated in his car on the way there. One special memory about Grandpa Vernon. His wife died young, and he became quite lonely. One night, I went into his house looking for him and discovered him in an upstairs bedroom with a maid in his bed. Sometime shortly after that, we had a talk about things that should be kept private. And I got a brand new erector set. It remained our secret. I was devoted to 2 of the old doctors of Westfield, Van Laughlin and Edgar Rood. I spent a great deal of time talking to them, and they were my motivation for going into medicine. I believed Cornell would be perfect for pre-med school, but my family didn't have enough money to send me. I discovered that there were generous scholarships in animal husbandry and agriculture, so I got in that program and switched over at the end of medicine. After graduation from Cornell and the University of Buffalo Medical School, I was able to get a job training and working at St. Luke's Hospital in Cleveland. While at Cornell, I met Elizabeth Myers, Betty, an education student from Pennsylvania. We married in 1940 and eventually had 4 children. These were the war years, and we were very nervous about where things were going. In July of '42, I joined the Navy and went to Great Lakes Naval Station. I had many medical duties. Sometimes I would examine as many as 2,000 recruits a day. I remember checking for hemorrhoids. The recruits were told to pull down their pants, put their info sheet in their mouth, and bend over while spreading their buttocks. It turned out that I could often see the information sheet between their legs. Sometimes I would say, "I can tell that this man is from Atlanta, Georgia, by the shape of his rectum." I had lots of fun with that. Ultimately, I ended up serving on the heavy cruiser, the San Francisco. I joined the ship in March of '44. We saw many engagements, and our guns were used to soften up the resistance on the islands. As an officer, I had numerous duties, including surgeries. I was in charge of testing all foods that came on the ship. When the senior medical officer got sick and left the ship, I took over as acting senior medical officer. That put me in charge of more than 1,200 men. Thank God for the medical corpsmen on board. They were a wonderful help. After the war, I returned to St. Luke's Hospital in Cleveland, but had to begin anew, at the bottom of the totem pole. After 2 years of doing all sorts of surgeries on a rolling ship, I was assigned to radiology for 6 months. Finally, I was able to do surgery and began to study with many accomplished surgeons. Several of us got together with some old war buddies and started the American Association for the Surgery of Trauma. I was a charter member. The goal was to put wartime procedures we had learned with mass casualties into place. Over time, my practice grew. I was active in organizations like Kiwanis and served as a deacon in the Fairmount Presbyterian Church. I had an interest in magic and at one time was considered the second best magician in Cleveland. I was involved in a number of medical groups and was teaching at both the Cleveland Clinic and Case Western University. I worked on editing a book on the history of medicine in Cuyahoga County and Cleveland. It's still required reading for medical students at Case. Writing was one of my passions, and I published 5 books. A favorite, 6 Against Death, includes the war stories of men from Westfield. Westfield still had my heart. I would often work all week in Cleveland and come to Westfield on the weekends and do surgeries at Westfield Memorial Hospital, where I was on staff. In 1982, when I retired, we moved to Westfield to live in the home that had been built by my great-uncle, Elmore Kent. Betty and I both became very involved in the community, serving the hospital, the library, and the YWCA. Westfield is a fantastic place, and it gave me all the upbringing I needed to become successful. I was always so proud to be from a small town that had so many wonderful people and experiences. Thank you.